I'm not really sure if I can say this. Yeah, I just didn't know really what I was doing. Start to realize I can see less and less and less. That's because the car's filling up with smoke. On the last lap, on the last corner, I get tagged and spun round, and I got hit head on twice. If you're not strong, like let's say a track or a certain corner or something, there's always a way to attack that. If you're avoiding doing it, there's no point in continuing because you're just not going to get better.
I saw you just started 3 years ago.
Yeah. Well, I'm quite different from most of the people in my championship in that I haven't done any karting. So I'm going against the guy from Belgium. He was vice world champion in I think it was the IAME series, and last year we had the champion from that series as well. So the champion and the vice champion, and he's supported by the Belgian government, and he's not the only karter. I mean, literally, I'd say all of us except for like three of us. I'm one of 3 drivers who hasn't done any karting on the grid right now. I didn't do any sim racing either before, which I'm like the only person in the championship who just jumped straight on, because the other guys, they did sim racing. But yeah, so in lockdown, I was sort of like just in my room in COVID. I was just like playing around on my G29. I didn't have any sim racing games. I had Project Cars, but I just didn't know much about it. I didn't know anything about Formula One. I didn't really know it existed, if I'm being honest. And then I got an illness, which meant that I had to stay inside for like 4 months in 2021. So my dad was like, "Oh, I'll take you karting because when you got the helmet on." Like, yeah. You don't have to speak to anyone. So he just took me rental karting. We're like, okay. I mean, I was all right. I wasn't like really good or anything. And then as a birthday present, my dad was like, "Oh, do you want to do a track day thing, Brands Hatch?" I was like, "Oh yeah, that'd be sick." So I got a junior license there, and that was my track day. And then just by pure chance, we bumped into the team owner and the series owner of the Saxo Championship that I did in 2022. It's called the Junior Saloon Car Championship. And he was like, "Oh yeah, why don't you do a test day with us?" And he was like, "Sure, why not?" So on New Year's Eve in 2021, I did one half day of testing in a Saxo around like this mini track. It wasn't like a real track or anything. And then the team manager, he was like, "Yeah, I want you to drive with us." So we tried the scholarship. I didn't win the scholarship, and then we were debating on whether or not to actually do the championship, because I mean, at the time that was like a huge amount of money. Like, it's a lot. The Saxo Championship is a lot less than the Formula 4 Championship, but prior to then, I mean, we never spent any money on motorsport or anything. So we were debating on doing that, and then we decided to do it in the end. And then I found myself in Silverstone with my dad. We'd never like been to any races or anything, because the first weekend was at Silverstone. And like, what the hell have we just gotten ourselves into? And on top of that, the week before then, I broke my foot playing football.
A week before your first race. Oh my god!
I could have avoided playing football. It was so stupid. I just rolled my ankle, and then it broke a small bone in my foot. So I couldn't walk. So I arrived in the paddock on crutches with a boot on, and then my first race, my fucking car catches on fire.
Oh my god. The amount of luck is just negative. Like, go as far as you want. It's not possible to find it.
Yeah, just a bad luck. But yeah, so my car catches fire because we did the international layout, so it's half of the GP circuit.
Yeah.
We used the F1 paddock. And so we come across, I'm on the hanger straight, and then my car, because some cars in the championship have windows that you can slide open, like little squares, like on GT3 cars.
Yeah.
But mine didn't. It had normal glass windows, so I couldn't roll down the window or open the door. And then I just start to realize I can see less and less and less. That's because the car's filling up with smoke. So I was like, fuck, I don't know what to do. Because it was literally my first race. So I just pulled into the pit lane. I couldn't see anything. And the whole underside of my car was on flames. And I just jumped out. They didn't let me race with the boot on because it's not fireproof. So I was like hobbling out. I jump out of the car because I'm just full of adrenaline. I don't feel my foot. And then my car's just burning there, which is quite funny. But I still finished in the points somehow. I finished like 18th because I red flagged it. Because in the Saxo Championship, they run the points quite far down. I can't remember until what position.
Is there footage online? Because I want to see that now.
Oh, and what's happened there? It looks like we've got a fire on somebody's car. Yes, up club corner. I think that's the number 280 of Gabriel Parfait. He's out of the car, he's okay, but it looks like that car has caught a light.
That weekend we only had 2 races, one race on Saturday, one race on Sunday. And then on the race on Saturday ended in flames, and then the race on Sunday, I just got absolutely taken out. So I didn't finish that one. It just I just got sandwiched and it broke my drive shafts.
There's Gabriel, and he's missing the front bumper, so damage to the front end. He's had some contact somewhere. I would guess that he hit Riley Price.
And then after the weekend, you thought like, yes, I want to do this for the rest of my life.
It was quite fun. That was the first crash I ever had, really. And then I was like quite surprised because I thought I'd be a bit more shocked by it. And I was like, no, because it's just like when you're so like on the road, everyone's so like conditioned to be like, if you like scratch the car a tiny bit, it's like it's the end of the world. But in the racing, obviously, it doesn't matter because you don't pay for the other car, you just pay for yourself if something breaks, which is good and bad because you can cause a lot of damage and you don't have to pay for any of it. But if somebody absolutely demolishes your car, they don't have to pay for it.
Yeah, true.
It goes both ways. So that weekend, it wasn't the best of weekends. I was still enjoying it, but I didn't have a coach. I didn't do any simulator work. I didn't have a simulator. I just had the G29, and I just didn't know really what I was doing. And then the next weekend out that we had was a track called Cadwell Park. Because it's a motorbike track, is very narrow, and so the racing is very interesting, to say the least, because it's maximum 2 cars width the entire track. The weekend goes well. I'm actually in the top 10 in terms of times. I qualify like 9th, I think it was, which was my best qualifying so far, because I was just like, going into my first weekend, I was like, I just hope I don't qualify last. And I qualified like 20th, which obviously isn't good. But like, I was just happy at that point because that was my first weekend that I just wasn't last. And then it was a grid of like 27, 28. And then I qualified 9th in the next weekend. Race 1, I finished like, oh, that's a good question, because in Cadwell we had 3 races on that weekend.
Oh, okay.
Race 1, I did well. I remember that. I don't know where I finished. I think I finished like 10th. Race 2, I didn't finish well. I think I finished like 15th. I dropped back quite a bit. Then race 3 was the interesting race of that weekend. So I was still healing from my broken foot. It was to the point where I could walk on it at this point. So, but it was still like fragile. And then, so race 3 comes about. I get a good start. I make up a few positions. And I'm running like 7th. And then red flag comes out. On the restart, I drop back a few positions because somebody crashed and they caused a red flag. And I was like, oh, okay. We restart the race. There's another red flag. Oh, okay. And so we have, it's like pretty much like Baku in Formula 1 in 2021. So we had like two racing laps at the end. So I had red flag and then we just had 2 racing laps.
Oh, wow.
And on the last lap, on the last corner, I get tagged and spun round and I got hit head on twice by 2 separate cars and that messed up my foot completely again. Yeah, it was a big crash. They had to close the circuit afterwards. There were meant to be more races after, but they couldn't do it because the track was so damaged by it, which was interesting because there you go, that's 2 weekends, 2 crashes. But yeah, so that one hurt quite a bit, and it was a big crash, but somehow my car wasn't completely totaled. Obviously I couldn't drive it, but the engine was still working somehow. After that weekend, I was like, I hope I actually get a good weekend after this one.
Yeah, because like, at some point you just need it.
Yeah, because it was getting hard to stay actually happy and motivated and not like, God damn it, I keep crashing. And so, yeah, I was looking forward to the one after that, which was at Snetterton. And this time I was staying with the mechanics because my parents weren't able to come with me. And this weekend we only had 2 races. Qualifying comes around. I don't do too well. I think I qualify like 14th for both races. In the first race, at the final corner, my teammate just cuts the track completely and just takes me out because he like, I think it was an accident, but yeah, it wasn't nice because I had to stop because it broke the drive shaft because it was just wheel side to side, wheel to wheel. Because he came across sideways. I think he got a moment. So I had to retire the car. So already, that was a great start to the weekend because my car was fucking done. And after that race, I just went to mechanics and I was like, I'm so sorry. Because I was making them work overtime after every weekend. But race 2 the next day, I was like, okay, fingers crossed. And it was actually not bad. I made up to P9 and I was like, okay. And I had the 3rd fastest lap of the race and I was like, okay, yeah. My pace was actually good. It's just if I could have done that in qualifying, I could have P3. But Yeah, on my I don't have it on my phone, but on my Instagram there's a clip from that race where it's at one point we were 3 wide battling.
As they come down into Agostini, it's 3 wide behind them. Look at this: Jamie Good, Jamie Petters, and Gabriel Parfait are 3 abreast. And Harvey Dent could cut underneath all of them here. Something had to give there, and that something was Parfait running wide onto the grass. They could be 4 wide into the left at Hamilton. Look at this, absolutely superb stuff. Onto the grass goes Parfait. Somebody seems to go wide on the grass every time they go through Hamilton, don't they? Jamie Good has now gone to the front of this group. Petters back up the inside. Can't keep up with this. He's now slotted in behind Parfait. So Zach Palmer's up to 7th.
It's just a brick on wheels, so you can just follow each other.
Yeah.
And the slipstream is good as well. But yeah, so that race finishes, and it was actually a good race. So I finished 9th, the 3rd fastest lap, and I was like, hey, yeah, good. So the next weekend after that, so that was in May, and then June comes around, and then we're back in Silverstone, but we're doing the national layout. So it's the other one. So it's like the one that looks like a boot.
Is it the one with the old pit straight? Yeah.
We only have like 1 practice session. Oh no, we had 2 practice sessions before qualifying, because usually we'd have a full day. But for this weekend, we only had 2. And so I was like, oh man, it was dry, all the practice sessions, and for qualifying, and going into qualifying, I was like, my pace wasn't very good. And I qualified like 11th, which wasn't that bad, because I was expecting a lot worse, because I felt like I was so slow. Sunday, this time, we had 2 races. So Sunday morning comes around, and it's absolutely pouring down with rain. And it was my first time properly driving in the rain. I didn't really know much. I didn't know anything about wet lines or anything, because I was still a complete rookie. So we go out, we get on the grid, the lights go off. I get an absolutely mega start. I finish lap 1 in P6 from P11.
Damn!
Yeah.
That's a good start.
Yeah. So I was like, okay, this actually can be nice. And then my pace was just good. I had the fastest lap right until the very end, but somebody got me by a 10th. So I just kept going lap after lap, because I was just focused on catching up to the cars in front. And then I get to around P5, and then red flag comes out. I lose position because they took the results from a lap before the red flag.
Okay.
So we do another start, and I get another good start, and this time I'm up to P4, and P5 off the start from P6. And I was like, okay, decent start. I get pushed wide at one of the corners. I'm like, fuck, all my progress is going to be erased because I've just been pushed wide. And so I just reset in the car, and I'm like, okay, all right, I'm just going to keep pushing. And then the lead 4 cars have made like a 5-second gap to me. I'm like, because we don't have, in the Saxo races, we only have 15 minutes versus 20 in the F4. And already that race was interrupted by red flags, so we only had about 10 minutes total of racing.
Oh.
And so it was a 3 or 4, nearly 5-second gap. So I was just keep pushing. And then all of a sudden, I catch up to them into the lead 4. And then I do a dummy on P4, and I stay on the inside. And on the outside into I can't remember which corner it was, but on the racing line where everybody else was, somebody the lap before we had gotten there, their oil just went all over the track, and I was the only person not to get on the oil. So in that one corner, I get past 4 cars, and I just inherit the lead out of nowhere, and I'm like,
oh my god.
Yeah, it was such a crazy thing. And then I only had the lead for 2 laps, and then the red flag came out again, and then they ended the race there. But I was like, fuck me, I'm actually good in the wet. And so I was like, okay, yeah, that's good. And then
that was your first win.
Yeah, my first win, and it was I think the first time ever in the championship somebody had won from lower than 10th place. I was like, good. I've still got my race list. This is what I got that day. I've never opened it. So I was looking forward to the race after that afternoon, because I was in the morning and then we still had the race in the afternoon. I was like, okay, maybe I can get a podium, but I was starting from 11th again, and I get another good start. But this time I get somebody absolutely rear ends me and breaks my my exhaust pipe, so that's bleeding me time on the straights. And somebody spun and came back on track and blocked me, and I lost positions. Otherwise I would have finished like P3. So in the end I finished P5 from P11, which still was a pretty good result. It would have been, if I hadn't won the race in that morning, it would have been my best result of the year. So I was still quite happy about that. And then with my dad, we didn't really know whether it was just like luck or skill for me to have won. So we were waiting for the next weekend. So I'd done well in the wet, And then we were like, okay, maybe we can see if I can do well in the dry. And then the next race weekend comes around in July. And it's at Knockhill track in Scotland. It's a really fun track. It's super small. There's like 6 corners in total, but there's loads of elevation change.
Oh,
there's
okay.
one corner where we jump the car. It's great. We arrived there and we're like, okay, if I can get a top 5 result, that would be good. Be good for getting results and getting sponsors and whatnot. So qualifying comes around. Red flag comes out about halfway through the qualifying session, and I come in to the box, to the pits, and my team manager was like, okay, good, you're looking at a top 3. And I was like, oh. I go out, I try and do more laps, but I just don't improve, but nobody else improves. And I come back in and I find out that I'm actually on pole position. I've just set the new lap record for that track. So
and that just happened when you thought like, yeah, P5 would be nice.
Yeah. Well, I did not expect it whatsoever. Like, I knew I was quick. My team manager was like, yeah, you're going to be quick you're quick at this track after the testing that we did. So I was like, yeah, well, let's just see. Because I don't know, I was a bit superstitious for qualifying, so I was like, I didn't want to say, yeah, no, I'm good, and then just do really shit. Yeah, I was just like, okay, cool. I've just done actually good qualifying. So I started in pole position, and I forgot to press record on my GoPro, so I've got no footage from that race.
Oh,
and it wasn't nice.
Wow.
We go out, I get a mega start off the line. I get like a second gap to the car behind, and then he just catches me. So he's about 7 tenths behind me, and he just dive bombs me into turn 1, runs me off the track. It was a dirty move. I'm all 4 wheels on the grass, and we're banging wheels, and I turn in on him to try and push him over to try and get back on the track, but it just doesn't work. So I lose position, and then I get caught up by the pack behind me. So I lost the win there, and I ended up finishing P3. But because I didn't have my GoPro, I didn't get the chance to look at it because I wanted to protest it, but my team manager was like, it's not really worth protesting because he hadn't seen it properly, and you have to pay like £250 to protest if the marshals don't see it. If you win the decision, you get your money back. But if the stewards say, oh, no, then you don't get your money back. So it's like a risk. And we were like, actually, is it worth, like, even if he does, because the guy that pushed me off ended up winning that race. I finished P3 and I was like, yeah, I guess I could finish P2, but he talked us out of it. And then I get talking. So that was Saturday, and then on Sunday we had another qualifying scheduled because they reverse the track layout. We do the reverse as well.
Oh, okay.
So we have 2 qualifyings that weekend. So on Saturday evening, I do another track walk with the team's coach, and he was there in the stewards room, and he said, just between me and you, you would have won the thing, because they ended up unofficially looking at it afterwards, and they were like, oh yeah, actually, because they have cameras. They have championship cameras in the car, but we're not allowed to look at them as the drivers, only they can look at it, which is completely stupid. But because in F4 there's only 1 camera on the car, and we're allowed to use it. But yeah, so the next day comes around, and we were like, okay, another pole position would be nice. I arrive at track festival. I forgot to mention, before this weekend, I nearly broke my hand. So I was taking loads of painkillers because I absolutely sprained it. Because I tried to jump over my friend in school, and I landed on my hand really awkwardly, which, again, really stupid of me. I need to stay away from doing stupid things in school. So I arrived late on Sunday morning. I nearly missed getting into the car for qualifying, and I forgot to take my painkillers. I didn't have any breakfast. And mentally, I was just completely out of it. Like, I was like, so I kept on messing up. I kept on fucking up in my qualifying, kept on going off on all my laps. And I qualified like 12th. And I was like, oh. The race after that, I finished like, I think it was P8 or P9. And yeah, I mean, I had really good pace. It's just at that track, it's impossible to overtake. Literally impossible.
Because especially it's so small.
It's so small, so narrow. So yeah, there wasn't much I could do. So after that weekend, we're like, okay, because I showed I had pace in the dry and in the wet, because my dad lives in the south of France, and there's a few racing drivers there. There's Romain Grosjean's dad lives literally 5 minutes away from my dad's house. Damn. So my uncle knew him, just knew that he lived there. So we reached out to Romain Grosjean's dad, and we spoke with him for a few hours at his house, and he advised us to do a test session with a team called Formula Motorsport, because they're the only people that had the chassis that French F4 uses at the time, because it was 2022 was the first year of the new regulations in F4 that introduced the halo and the new chassis.
In 2022 they introduced the halo?
Yeah.
So 4 years, 4 years after F1?
Yeah, it's quite late.
Yeah.
The non-Halo cars were quicker because the Halo, the problem is with the Halo, it's good for saving lives, but because it's so heavy and it's so high up, it just means the center of mass is quite high up, and it just makes it slower. But yeah, he advised us to do a test session, and it's a team that Romain Grosjean did his first test sessions with, so they knew each other quite well. We ended up doing that. We also spoke to a guy who did. He's called Benoit Trelulier. He's won Le Mans 3 times with Audi. He used to be their factory driver in the hypercar division. So yeah, he basically told us the same thing. And Formula Motorsport's owned by, I don't know if you know Kevin Estre.
No.
He's a GT3 driver, and he's a Porsche hypercar driver, and it's his dad who owns that team. So we fast forward a bit into later on in the year, and we ended up doing test day. So I got it as like a birthday present, but it was mainly to evaluate me, and it was insane. The first ever time the first lap that I did in the F4 car I spun. Which was quite funny. Kevin was there to coach that day. Super useful because he's a really good driver. But yeah, the first time that because in the Saxos, it weighs like nearly a ton. It weighs like 950 kilos, and we have less than 100 horsepower.
Yeah.
And that's my first time in a car, so it's like the F4 car weighs like 600 kilos, got 180 horsepower. So I just touched the throttle, and it's like, I just get sent back. And it's just
You weren't prepared for the G-forces.
The G-force is just insane because I hadn't felt anything like it. It's like being on a roller coaster all the time. Like now I don't feel it because my body's just used to it. But the first ever time, it was like just insane. The day ends, and the guy who was running Formula Motorsport, he was like, "Yeah, you just need to find a bit more time, then I think you'd be able to do the French F4 Championship next year." I start not doing well in the Saxo Championship. At that point, straight after Knock Hill in the Saxo Championship, we had a summer break, which is then when I went. So I spoke to Romain Grosjean's dad, and then we organised test day for late September.
Yeah.
But between then, so we had a race weekend in late August and late September as well, and then our final weekend was at Brands Hatch in mid-November, and then the last 3 weekends of the year just went so badly for me. I was lacking pace in Croft. That was down to me. And I was lacking pace as well. So there were 4 weekends. Pembrey, that weekend was very frustrating because we arrived. I had quite good pace for that, I thought. But the problem is my team started trying to sign up too many drivers that they had enough mechanics for. So we didn't have enough mechanics, and the new driver, he just binned it on the test day, binned his car, and so all the mechanics were just working on his car. And I said, I've got a problem with my engine because I'm losing a shit ton of time on the straights. Like the guy who'd never driven a race car before was doing faster lap times with me purely because he actually had a normal engine on the straights.
Yeah.
So I showed them the footage, and they were like, "No, sorry. No, there's nothing wrong with it." When even my teammates are there, they're like, "No, there's something wrong with this car." Because they would follow me. Because I'd be really strong on corner entry, really strong on corner exit, get a good exit. Then halfway down the straight, everyone's gapping me. And so I was like, come on, what's the problem? And then we got into a thing with the manager, and they said 5 minutes before qualifying, "Oh yeah, there's a problem with the car, but we can't fix it before qualifying." And I was like,
"Oh my
come
God.
on, qualifying set up the whole weekend." So that was really, really frustrating. So I qualify second to last, just in front of the new guy. And then after qualifying, when they actually fixed it, my car actually starts to feel good. So on the first lap of every race, I make up like 15 positions. I end up finishing like 12th or 11th every race from like second to last. I think there were like 26 cars that weekend. So it was a decent recovery, but it was just, I shouldn't have been placed in that position in the first place.
Yeah, this team just screwed you over.
Yeah. I mean, the other thing is that my team, there were 2 big teams, and I was in the second big team. And then the first big team, the budget was just twice as much. After every weekend, they deconstructed the car. They had at least 2 mechanics for every single car, and they were found to be cheating. So they've been banned from the championship now. So the budget, like they'd analyzed data. They had fancy cameras. They had VBox machines, which would like record data from the car. They would record proper video, whereas I just had my GoPro. That's it. So it's quite a disadvantage anyway. I mean, I was still beating them in the weekends before that point, but obviously that's the weekend where it really showed the difference. Yeah, so the final weekend comes around. It was at Brands Hatch, and I was like, okay, I think I'll have decent pace here. Because my car was actually good that weekend, and I felt good. I had like top 5 pace, but in qualifying they put in it's called an aim box, it's like a thing where it tracks your lap time, and you can see it, and
yeah.
you can see your delta from your fastest lap. And at one point I was on a really good lap. I was 8/10 up on my next fastest lap.
Mm-hmm.
And then I'm like, okay, don't mess up, don't mess up, don't mess up, don't mess up. And I messed it up.
Ah.
And then I took up my qualifying and I qualified like 13th, I think. I think I finished 10th one race, maybe 7th another race. And then I just got absolutely massacred in turn 2 in the last race because it was double points that weekend. So everybody lost their minds of it. So after that, I didn't do any F4 testing in the weekend, in the winter, because I didn't tell anyone. We didn't have the budget to do any testing. And then we go to, because the French F4 Championships based in Le Mans in France. And we go there in March to do they have a meeting at the start of every year where they go through different things. They brief
The pre-season.
Yeah.
Okay.
And we do pre-season testing there, and I'm super slow in the F4 car. I'm like, no, because I was like, I had the same sort of mindset. I just didn't want to be last because the level was a lot higher than the Saxo Championship already. Because the Saxo Championship, there were a lot of people. Most people did karting as well, but obviously because it's a Saxo Championship and not F4, the level is considerably lower.
Yeah.
And then I was just hoping not to be last. And then I'm finishing second to last in all the time sessions. I was like, okay, right. There's a problem here. So I thought there was a problem with my car, but actually no, it was just my driving and I was just being an idiot. I was still turn 1 at Le Mans, it's flat out and then you brake for the Dunlop chicane.
Yeah.
And I was braking with a tiny bit of steering lock and that was causing me to lock up my front right every single lap, which was just a skill issue for me, but I just thought there was something wrong with the car. So after that, the first race weekend comes around and my pace is actually good. I didn't do too well in qualifying. I think I did 14, 14, and 17, because in French F4, every weekend there's 3 races, where the first race is determined by your fastest lap, and so is the second race, but the second race, the top 10 are inverted.
Oh, okay,
so
okay.
if you have P10, you have pole position for race 2, and the third race is just everyone's second fastest time. So I really wanted to qualify in the top 10. I did the best I could that weekend because I still didn't have a coach. I was just working with my dad. So yeah, in terms of race pace, I had really good race pace. I had 7th fastest lap, 8th fastest lap. I was just in the top 10 in terms of pace every single time. But for me, the biggest problem I had going from the Saxo to the F4 car was not only going from a front wheel drive to a rear wheel drive, but it was going from having absolutely no downforce and next to no grip to having downforce, slick tires, and insane amount of grip. So I just did not trust the car laterally. Yeah, it was just a massive thing, and that's something I battled through the whole of last year, just confidence in the car. And it's only from the midpoint of last season onwards that I started working with School of Send. So Callan O'Keefe, who's my coach, he used to be part of the Red Bull Driver Academy because he was super good, and he still is really good now. For him, he used to kart with Verstappen and Leclerc, Albon, because he was genuinely, it wasn't just he'd finish in the same race, he'd be last, Verstappen would be first. No, he'd be on the podium with them, he'd win races against them. He was really good. So that's why the Red Bull Academy picked him.
But why didn't he make it to what was his highest formula that he made?
He gets scouted by the Red Bull Academy team, and Helmut Marko was like, yeah, if you crash the car, we'll pay for it, whatever, because he couldn't afford to pay for a single seater season because it was and still is just super expensive. So he does well, and then one day he crashes a car. And then Helmut Marko was like, you need to pay us 100,000 euros right now or you're out of the team. It was a stupid amount like that. Obviously, he couldn't afford it because that's almost the cost of a full season at that time.
Was it that much damage, or was it just you need to pay that because we actually just want you out of the team?
I don't really know. I think it might have been a bit of both because obviously, the Red Bull Academy is absolutely ruthless.
Yeah.
And I think he wasn't quite winning enough races at the time. Callan, he was like, right, well, this is just insane because you've just gone back on your word. So he just smashed all of Helmut Marko's desk, stormed out the room, and he spoke to him a few years after, and Helmut Marko was saying to Callan, I was actually thinking of re-signing you after you broke everything on my desk because it showed you were so passionate about it. He's a bit of a crazy guy.
Helmut or...
Not Callan. Helmut.
Yeah.
Exactly. Callan's really cool. At that point, once he got dropped from the Red Bull Academy team, that was just such a problem for him because he couldn't get enough funding to continue, which is why he does driver coaching now. Because otherwise, I think he could have even gotten to Formula One. He's really quick. He's still good friends with Alex Albon. I'm not sure if he's still in contact with Verstappen, but he works with a driver in a FIF3 right now. That's his highest category that he works with, but it's super good. So ever since we started working with Callan from the midpoint of last season, my results have just been getting better and better and better. And at that point, I only got my simulator until the second to last weekend. And from there, me and Callan, we do simulator work together. So we prepare for the weekend. We do racecraft preparation, quali simulation. So we do like what we were doing, but like we do it in the F4 car, obviously, and we race each other. And one thing that I sort of struggled with last year and at the start of this year was getting frustrated in the car. So if we were doing a quali simulation, he'd say, "Oh, you want a good lap?" And I was like, "Yeah, I'm actually on a good lap." And he'd just try and mess it up on purpose. And the whole point was to try and get me annoyed, but to try and get me to control my emotions in the car. Because in the car, it's all about staying calm. And so, yeah, that's been super helpful. And last year, it felt like I learned pretty much nothing because over the winter, I did one test at Barcelona after my season of F4 last year. And I just relearned how to drive completely. And now I'm actually quick. Like last year in the championship standings, I only finished in the points once, and that was in my very last race. So I only did one top 10 last year, just because I was slow. And this year, it's just been turned completely on its head. Like, I'm quick. I'm quite quick now. Like at the first race weekend of this season, I would have easily qualified in the top 10. But again, I hadn't done any mental preparation with my coach just yet because we only started doing that from just before Spa, which was the third weekend of this season. But for the first 2 weekends, we didn't do any mental preparation. So red flag comes out on my first push lap, and I'm like, fuck, I just destroy my tyres because I don't warm them up properly after the red flag. So I qualify like 12th, and I'm like, God damn it. And I was so angry. And then in the races, it didn't go to plan either. I tried to finish in the top 10, but I spun in the first race when I was in the top 10. Second race, can't even remember what happened. It was just a bit of a shit show. And then in the third race, I got taken out. But in the third race, because I got taken out, I just changed my nose cone, came into the box, changed my nose cone, went back out, just did clear laps on my own. I had the second fastest lap, and I had the fastest sector 3. It showed that I did have pace. I just needed to apply it for qualifying. So I put a lot of pressure on myself into the next race weekend. So for the second race weekend, I was like, for qualifying, I can't mess it up. I just got into my head so much that I messed up my qualifying. So I missed the top 10 again, which wasn't very good. And then in the first race, it was, again, a bit of a shit show.
But you would say, like, the biggest step up is mainly just mentally being prepared for it.
Oh, yeah, for sure. Yeah, people don't really realize that not only is motorsport so physical, which is what also I wasn't prepared for last year, because there were times where I just couldn't turn the wheel. It's just that hard. But also, it's just so mental, because if you start getting frustrated or angry in the car, like, I don't know if you watched the Formula 1 at Hungary when Max Verstappen was just getting angrier and angrier every lap. I was waiting for him to make a mistake, and then straight away he just dive bombs Lewis Hamilton and just sends himself flying. As soon as you start getting frustrated, you just get more frustrated, and you start not thinking about your driving, and you start thinking about being frustrated, and that's when the mistakes come in. That's what I also like about racing, is you can try and make other people frustrated. And that's one of Max Verstappen's favorite things, because when in karting, when he'd race against my coach, and what he still did in his junior formulas, I don't think he does it as much now in Formula 1, but when he's defending, he tries to make the person he's defending against as annoyed as possible. And Max Verstappen would get so angry and frustrated at my coach because Callan just wouldn't be affected by it, and he'd just stay calm. In the end, Verstappen just hurting himself, and that's when Verstappen would just get frustrated himself, and that's how Callan would be able to pass him and stuff like that. But yeah, that's the thing with motorsport. You can just do so many mind games. It's just so fun. It's just a side of motorsport that when you only watch it, you just don't really realize, because you're not in the mind of a driver.
Yeah.
You're just see it happening. It's good fun when you can force people into mistakes, just distract them. Like, even if you're just like following and then you just show yourself in their mirror, you just scare them a bit and then they lock up and just go straight on. You know, it's just little things like that, and it just makes a world of difference when you're trying to attack. Coming into the second race weekend of this year, I just put too much pressure on myself for qualifying, and I messed it up. I just kept making mistakes on all my push laps because I was putting too much pressure on every single lap, so I'd start overthinking my driving, making mistakes, not being quick. So race 1, I made another mistake, so I just stayed 13th. Race 2, that was an interesting race. I actually got a decent start. I was in the top 10, and then an incident happened where I ended up on top of another car, which wasn't very ideal. I got blamed for it by the stewards. However, I politely disagree with the decision that they came to, because in the stewards' decision, moving under braking for them is fine.
It's fine.
Yeah, because for them, they're not breaking any rules by doing it. But we've been told by the academy many times before that race, stop moving under braking. Stop moving under braking. So nobody's moving under braking. I go to dive bomb this guy, and while I've committed to braking, he moves under braking to attack somebody else. And because I've already committed, I've already got my foot on the brake pedal, and he brakes slightly earlier and moves in front. I've got nowhere to go. I tried to steer to avoid him, but by steering, you brake less. So I was like, oh fuck, I'm steering. Okay, I can't steer anymore. And then I just mount his car and end up on top of it. But because I tried to avoid it, that's what got me the penalty. Because I said, oh, you could have gone the other way. And I was like, yeah, but if I'd gone the other way, I would have ended up on the grass and T-boning somebody across the hairpin. Maybe even broken their ribs or killed them or something. You know, it's because when you have T-bone collisions, that's when it's the most dangerous.
Yeah.
So yeah, but they didn't agree with me on that. That got me extra frustrated that weekend. And then race 3 was a bit of a disaster. Because I got a great penalty for that, and I ended up like P20 or something. That weekend was a shit show completely. After that weekend with my coach, we just worked on staying calm, not getting frustrated, and then not treating qualifying as like this, like as if every single lap is the only lap that you'll ever do, which is what I was kind of doing. What Callan made me realize is that qualifying isn't any different than a free practice session, because in any session as a racing driver, you're just trying to be as fast as possible. It's just like qualifying, it just determines an order afterwards. But once I realized that, qualifying straight away in Spa, boom, P9, easy. And it was just, I stayed calm, you know, there's a red flag in an annoying time, but I just stayed calm. And while other people were fighting to get toe, because it was a wet quali, I just decided to do my own thing. And for me, that worked well, because I had clear track in front and behind me, and I was just able to focus on my driving. And so yeah, that worked literal wonders for me. And then race 1, I did a P9 to P8, but I made a mistake, so I lost one position. Oh, I was about to in P7. Then race 2, I started P2 because of the reverse grid, and this time it was in the dry, and I was actually quite a good race. I stayed. I could have taken the lead. Problem was I sort of messed up my exit out of La Source, and it put me under pressure from P3 and P4. So we went side by side through a rouge, and I didn't lift, but he lifted, which I kept my P2. But it just meant that I lost a bit of time to P1, so we made a bit of a gap. And then I held P2 for around 17 out of the 20 minutes, and then rain came just at turn 1, and I went straight. It was really unfortunate, because if the rain came a lap later or a lap before, even if I'd gone straight on, it wouldn't have mattered. It's just that lap, I had to defend against 2 cars at once, and then I just lost the podium from there. And then after that, I just kept tumbling down the order, because I was just downward momentum from there. But yeah, and then coming into Nürburgring, we did a lot of preparation. So I was really quick in the dry, comfortably like P6, P7 in all the practice sessions. And then it rains just before qualifying. So we did a practice session, then qualifying just on the Friday, because we only had 2 sessions that day. In the practice session, it rained really heavy. And then qualifying, it was dry. And that just messed me up, because I knew that for me, for changing conditions, it's a bit of a weak point for me, which is what I need to work on. Going from extreme wet to just bone dry, that messed me up completely, and I didn't set a single quick lap. So I qualified P18, and I was like, I want to go home. Looking back at it, when I watch over, look at the data, watch over my laps, it's like there's so many obvious mistakes I was doing. It's just like, I don't know what the word is. It just messed me up, changing conditions.
It's just difficult to adjust to it, because you're used to the wet racing line or wet braking points. To just move over to the dry without any practice is really difficult.
Yeah, exactly. That's exactly what messed me up. Race 1 came, and I was like, oh, I'll just hopefully try and get a top 10, and then that's the one where I did P18 to P4. That race, it was all about surviving, because everyone kept going off in front of me. Like every single lap, at least one car would go straight on at turn 1, end up in the gravel, and then lose a load of places trying to rejoin. And then I just missed out on the podium, which I'm kicking myself still to this day about. And then race 2, I was hoping for the same thing. They started it under safety car, which meant that I couldn't make up 10 places.
That makes it a lot more difficult.
So I ended up doing not bad. I think I would have finished on P7, which would have been really good, but I got pushed out wide. I ended up on the gravel side, ended up last, and then had to make my way back up again. So I did P18 to P15. So I still ended up moving up places, but it didn't matter because I didn't score any points. And then race 3, because I didn't set any times for qualifying, I started P22, and I was like, there's not much point, because race 3 was dry as well. It's harder to move up places in the dry, because the delta of pace is quite smaller.
Yeah, everybody's closer together.
The skill is quite closer, whereas in the wet it's quite wider. So I decided I did a pit lane start, let everybody go, and I just treated it like a qualifying session, and I did like the 3rd or 4th fastest time. So
it was just unlucky with the qualifying, which made it the worst in the last race, and with the safety car, which I still don't understand, because you said it was the same as in the morning, so they should have just made it a standing start.
Everybody on the grid was like saying, why, all the drivers, we agreed with you, like, why the hell was it safety car? And I don't think it was the right decision, but I can understand why they wanted to do it in case there was a car that stalled on the start and people didn't see it with the spray. But then why didn't they just safety car start the first race? They explained themselves, but then they also didn't. So for me, I disagree with that. But what can you can't control. Well, one thing we worked on with my coaches is like reminding myself that I can't control what other people do, but I can control how I react to it and what I can do. It just makes it so much easier for me to not get frustrated. But yeah, and that brings us to now, and we're sort of at the midpoint through the season now. And because I've sort of not had the best couple of weekends to begin with, I'm not where I should be in the championship standings. So hopefully next race at Manicourt at the end of this month will be better. I'm going to try and do a good qualifying there. The trouble is for me is just really finding sponsors, because since I haven't got the good results, I haven't got the exposure, and I don't have the momentum to find sponsors yet, because I'm not at the point where sponsors are reaching out to me. You know, if I what we're thinking of doing next year is maybe going into something GT-wise where the level is lower, almost guaranteed to get podiums and wins and whatnot, because the level is so tight in F4 and high. It just means that if you're somewhat good in F4, you're going to be really good in most of the series, which I'm trying to do. So yeah, we've been talking to a few people, but it's still very early days to decide for me. Because a lot of people, if I had a good start of the season, like let's say I was doing a few podiums this year already, I think we'd sort of know roughly what we'd be doing, like maybe doing Freca or Euro Cup or something, but because I haven't been doing that, I'm not at the level where I can say that confidently that I'd do well in those series.
But sometimes you maybe have to bluff a bit to get lucky and show yourself. You are 17 now, right?
Yes.
Your plans for next year are still unsure, but do you have maybe like a main goal of what you want to do later if you succeed with all the racing stuff? Is it like, do you have Le Mans, Nürburgring? Is it maybe like the WEC series? Do you have like a goal that you want to do in the future?
Well, I think with what my goal is, obviously I'd love to do Formula One, but you know, it's next to impossible to get into that, even if you're super good, just because it's all about not only being good, but you have to have all the right contacts, you have to have all the right money, all the right sponsorships. So I think it's a dream, but it's quite unrealistic. Like you obviously got to have dreams, but you also have to have realistic. Yeah. I think for me, I'm happy doing any series, whether that be single seaters, GT, prototype, endurance, whatever. I just want to be a pro driver where I'm paid to drive, so that way I can have it as a sustainable career for myself. Like maybe becoming a factory driver for say McLaren or Mercedes or something for their GT series. That way I'd get paid to drive their cars, to develop them, or even become an endurance driver. Honestly, my plans are quite open. I'm open to anything. I think single seater, Christian Grosjean, Roman Grosjean's dad, was saying, and Benoit Treluyer agrees, that single seater is just like you can branch off to anything from there, because you can go from GT to single seater, but it's so hard to do, which is what I did last year. The Saxo Championship wasn't GT, but it was still like a car. It wasn't a single seater car.
It was closer to GT than it was to Formula.
Yeah. So it's with the single seater, I can branch off to anything and transfer most of my skills into there. So I think I'm quite confident in that whatever I get put in, I'm going to be quite strong. Yeah, quite strong in whatever I end up doing, which is why I'm really just open to doing whatever opportunity comes up to me. If I can just become a pro driver, for me, that's that's my realistic goal that I want to set for myself.
I think that's the best thing to do, because if you focus too much on one thing, you lose the broad perspective of everything. Yeah. And if you do not succeed in that one thing, but you still have a lot of other options, you don't see the options, and you get into like a tunnel vision, which is not good to do. And like if you were to give advice to someone just starting out with racing, maybe even just online, what's your best piece of advice that you could give someone starting?
One thing that I really struggled with when I was starting out was being confident in myself and my own abilities, because I'm less superstitious now, but I was quite superstitious back then. Whenever I'd not get a good result, I just doubt everything, doubt whether I should be driving, doubt every decision that I'd made up until that point. And it's really what the advice I'd give is just to stay confident in yourself, because for a lot of drivers who succeed, they're not just born into talent straight away. Obviously, being talented is one thing, but you also have to be extremely hardworking as well, because you can be not as naturally talented, but you can still work hard to get to the point where you're at the same level as somebody who's been karting since they were 4 years old, and that just makes them so by the time they're 15, 16, 17, they just look naturally talented, which is a story for 95% of drivers. There's only like a once in a generational talent like Verstappen, who I'd say is one of the only real cases of just pure natural talent. For him,
and of course his dad as well.
Yeah, his dad being a Formula One driver, his mum being an extremely successful karting driver. I think that's just the perfect conditions to make a racing driver. driver. He's literally like engineered to become a racing driver. The main advice is just to remember that it's not so much just if you haven't got results, it's not because you're just bad and you're just going to always be bad. It's that you can work hard to get those good results. And obviously, if you're doing sim racing, you don't have a constraint on how much you can do because you can just keep going, keep improving. And if you're doing it in real life, taking as much time as possible in between weekends to really understand and attack what your weak points are, because if you waste time and avoid things that you're not comfortable with, which is what I did a bit last year because I didn't want to affect my confidence, which was shooting myself in the foot even more, you're not going to get anywhere because you're not working on your weak points. Because you're not working on your weak points, you're getting worse results and it's making you less confidence. Whereas if you just attack your weak points, and like even now when I go against my coach when we're doing sim racing sessions, there's times where I'm quite far off them and that affects my confidence quite a bit. But when we're working together, it's realizing that not only is my coach more experienced than me, he's done a lot of hard work to get where he is, and I've done, because I haven't had less experience, I haven't done as much as he has to get to where he is now. If I was as good as he is now, he wouldn't be a very good coach. It's just a thing where just remembering that hard work is what's going to get you there, not believing in any superstitions. Or I mean, you can believe in superstitions, but I think you hurt yourself a bit more.
Damn, I gotta be honest, that's some good advice. So for me now, after almost like 10 years of racing F1 games and stuff, I still feel like I have a lot to learn. And yeah, just that lap that we did where you said like everything that I did wrong. For me, that's not like you're attacking and saying like, Nick, you're slow, you shouldn't be doing this. That's for me like, okay, there's a lot of good feedback that I can use in the future and that I will definitely look back to. If I feel like I'm slow, I can't find pace, what can I do? I just listen to the advice there and it's really easy to improve then.
Yeah, there's always a solution. If you're not strong like let's say a track or a certain corner or something, there's always a way to attack that and a way to make yourself better. If you're avoiding doing it, there's no point in continuing because you're just not going to get better. Even for the most experienced drivers, like drivers in Formula One, they're still learning things every time they go out on track. There's no driver, even Verstappen or Hamilton, they don't know every single thing because for them they're still getting more and more experience every time they get in the car, and they're still learning things every time they get into the car, even if it's just small things for them because they do have so much experience. If they get good results, they don't just suddenly stop working. They have to keep working to stay on top, because if you find yourself leading the championship in the first half of the year and you start slacking off because you feel like your competition is not as good, the competition that's trying to catch you, they're still working hard, and by the second half of the year they're going to overtake you because they're working harder than you, and then your paths are going to go, you're going to plateau and they're just going to keep going up and up and up. Yeah, working hard and making sure that you, again, going back to what I was saying, just really attacking your weak points and making yourself as best of a driver as you can.
So the goal is to attack your weak points and not avoid them.
Yes.
Oh boy, I should have done that with a lot of things. That's not just racing, that's in everything in life. You just gotta attack them.
I avoided more than I should have my weak points last year to avoid knocking my confidence down and realizing just how far off I was in some areas. And now, since I've been working with Callan, he's really forcing me to work on my weak points. And straight away in the race where I finished before, I scored more points than the whole of last year and the whole season of this year up to that point combined. And that's just by all of the hard work that we've put into it, staying mentally strong as well, because after qualifying, there's a few minutes where I did feel like just going home, but with my dad and my coach, they really motivated me and tried to get me to remember that the weekend actually isn't over, because there's still things you can salvage from it, because you can execute a perfect weekend up until qualifying and then it just unravels in qualifying. Even the best drivers in the world, they're going to have a bad qualifying session at some point and they're not going to just give up. That race where I went from P18 to P4 and scored my best results in F4 yet has taught me a lesson, really has taught me a lesson, that even if I find myself in a position where it just feels like it's impossible to come out of, anything can happen. You can find yourself doing your best result of the year from your worst qualifying of the year. It's crazy how things work out. It's just remembering that to just never give up.
I always hear on like TikTok and Instagram and everywhere where you see short form content that people always live by a quote. Do you have the same thing, or is it like you just attack the weak points?
Oh, that's a good one. One of my favorite quotes from NASCAR, it's that guy who said, "I'm not lifting until I see God or the checkered flag."
I don't remember exactly what race it was, but that's a good one, yeah. How do you manage it with school? Because I heard you had like a weekend in June. As far as I know, I have exams in June. How do you work around that to still perform good in school and do racing?
I had an exam straight after Spa, because we had Spa-Francorchamps that weekend. Then on the Monday morning, I had my maths exam. That was really tough, and I didn't do well on those exams just because, I didn't do pretty much any revision for that weekend because I was preparing for my race weekend. The main thing I've been struggling with in school is putting in the time and effort to consolidate my skills, because in class I can learn and generally very good in class. We learn something and we do classwork straight away. I'm at the level doing well. But when it comes to exams, it's just I haven't done enough practice and revision to remember all these things. Obviously, I think I can work harder in school. One thing for me that I find quite difficult is staying motivated in school when I do my racing, just because I find my racing so much more fun than doing schoolwork. But I do have to remember that it is so important as well, because ultimately, if something happens and I don't end up racing, I need to have my backup of having good schoolwork and have maybe a degree in university or something like that, because I'm doing A-levels right now.
So it's still doable.
It's doable, but I just need to be a bit more motivated in school.
I think the worst part for the last few months I've had the same, because I like to do video editing as well. And of course with making videos that's helpful. But I've noticed that I can see a future in video editing and I didn't really see a future with school. So for me, the same, it was really difficult to stay motivated because you see a future in something else and then you want to continue fighting for that future and not sit on a chair just listening to someone who's trying to teach you what kind of volcanic eruptions are happening in the Philippines or something.
The main thing that motivates me in school is just because I just imagine I have to put myself in the situation where I'm putting myself in the worst case scenario for my racing where I don't end up doing it, and that's what really motivates my schoolwork, because I don't want to end up being a failure basically, because I don't there's other things I could do, but I really want to have a good degree or something like that and get a good job if I don't end up doing my racing, because I do, when I'm older, I want to have financial freedom and be able to, maybe someday if I have kids in the future, have them do racing, whereas if I don't have a good career, it'll be impossible.
I think that's with most of our generation now. Everybody wants financial freedom and not just a standard jobs.
It's just the problem is that everything is so expensive now. It's going to be interesting in 10 or 15 years to see what our generation ends up being like. It's just impossible to predict, I think.
You said in school you have to do good for a backup plan. Your worst case scenario is for a lot of people their ultimate goal to do.
Yeah. That's now that you say that, that's put it into perspective. I'm very grateful. I'm very lucky that I'm in this position where I'm able to do what a lot of people dream of doing, racing in real life. Because I do racing, I just want to take it as far as possible, because with me, with my dad, with my coach, we've worked so hard to get me to this position. I want to take it as far as possible, and that's why for me a normal life would be my worst case scenario, because it would almost be like doing all this hard work would be for nothing. And I want to be able to pay back my dad, show him and show anyone who sponsors me that it was worth it, and show my coach that it was worth it, which is definitely why for me a normal life would be a worst case scenario.
And now it's still 3 races left in the season?
Yeah.
Of course, you have the goal to win every single race. But do you think at one of the 3 circuits that you will be strong enough to challenge for a podium or maybe even a win?
I think going forward from this point onwards, I think no matter what the track, I think I have the pace to challenge for a win or for a podium. But it's just putting myself in the position of being able to challenge where I do get a good qualifying. Because for me, I definitely think my weakest point is qualifying. What I do really need to focus on without putting too much pressure on myself is getting another good qualifying result like I did at Spa, because once you're inside the top 10, it's just so much easier to capitalize on mistakes in front, because not only are you already in the points, but you're just so close to the podium that if the top 3 wipe themselves out and you're in P6, you're already on the podium. And if you qualify even like P8, you start from the reverse grid, P3, making sure that I get myself in a good qualifying position where I can capitalize, because at the Nürburgring, if I'd qualified P2, for any of these races, I had the pace to stay there or even challenge for the win. I had to work from all the way back from 18th to get there. And at Spa, it was I qualified P9, but I had a lot stronger pace than I actually qualified, because on my qualifying lap at Spa, my fastest lap was at the bus stop chicane. I thought I'd messed up. So I lost one entire whole second in the bus stop chicane preparing for another lap.
And that was your fastest lap, with preparing for another lap.
So otherwise I would have been, I think my pure pace in that session was around like P5, P6. I was shooting myself in the foot in the wet because I was turning in on the rubber, which would cause more understeer, which would be a ruthless cycle where I'd just push less the entries. Whereas after Spa, I worked on that with my coach, and straight away we go into the Nürburgring. It's where I set the fastest sector 2, which is just all corners by 0.3 of a second. If there's another wet qualifying session, I think I can challenge in the top 3. I think from now on it's going to be just dry sessions. I think I definitely have the pace to challenge in the top 10 easily. I just like to aim for a top 5 qualifying.
Yeah, of course. Let's just hope that every single session from now on is just a wet.
Fingers crossed.
I was first wondering, like, why were you not in the British Formula 4 instead of the French?
It's too expensive.
Oh, too expensive. Oh, okay.
Double the price of French F4.
Of course, if you're allowed to say that. What's the price for the 1 year in Formula 4 in France?
I think you're looking at around 300,000 euros for the season in French F4. Whereas if you, and that's not taking into account any testing you do, personal testing, or that's cheap. That's cheap for Formula 4. It's the cheapest one you can do. Whereas if you're looking at British F4, I mean, you're looking in the region of £400,000, which is around 500,000 euros. And if you want to go to Italian F4 and you want to go to Prema, you're looking at 800,000 or 900,000 euros if you don't get a good price.
What? There's lots more money than I expect, and there's only F4. Or like not only, but like compared to Formula 3 and Formula 2, where you have to pay a lot.
In Freca, if you want to go with a good team, you're looking at. I'm not really sure if I can say this. If you're a champion of a series, a team will give you a lot lower price than if you're just like a midfield driver. One team, which I'm not going to say the name of the team or the drivers, where one driver didn't do very well last year in one championship, and from the same championship, and they have another driver which is the champion of that same championship. The driver who didn't do very well is basically paying for the other guy's seat, so he's paying a ridiculously large amount of money, whereas the guy who was champion is paying next to nothing. It's about how much the team respects you, and it's the same for any series in single seaters, FIA, F3, F2, whatever. I mean, it's just based on how much the team boss respects you and how much they want to charge you, because they can do whatever they want, which is why French F4 is good, because since it's all one team and academy format, everyone pays exactly the same, and there's no car advantages to anyone, because the guy who owns Prema also owns the engine supplier for Italian F4. And you wonder why Prema do so well in Italian F4 every single season. Is there a conflict of interest there? Whereas there's no such thing in French F4.
I always thought there was just a set price for entry, but of course I should have expected in a world like motor racing that there would be a higher and lower prices for the way that people treat you and how you get treated and how you treat other people. Like, goddamn. You got that money then from the sponsor? Or did you pay a lot of it yourself?
Right now, we're pretty much self-funded. My sponsor, Operator Training, sponsors me a bit, but it's not enough to pay for... They pay for my gear, my racing gear, which is very useful because it's still money saved for us. But on the vast majority, it's self-funded by my dad, which is why we are desperately trying to find sponsors.
I fully understand now why you need a lot of sponsors to actually get in a higher class. There's a lot of money going around in that world.
You know, even FIA F3, you're looking at, if you want to be in a decently good team and you're not the best driver, I mean, you're still good, you're looking in the ballpark of like 1.3 million euros, which is absolutely insane. I don't really know much about the F2 prices, but I can tell you that it's probably a decent bit more than that. If you can get a sponsor that's willing to pay an enormous amount of money, then you are absolutely sorted. You can do whatever you want, because then you can do testing whenever you want. If you're Lance Stroll, you have a dad who's hugely wealthy, you can just do so much testing, and it just opens up the door for opportunities for you, because you just get better and better and better. If you have instead of a very limited amount of testing, you can still be good. You can still be just better if you do more testing. So for me, I've only done 2 private tests over the course of this year and last year. I did Barcelona over the winter, and then in between rounds 1 and rounds 2 this year, I did Mugello, and we chose Barcelona and Mugello because those are high-speed tracks to work on my confidence. They've been really useful to me. So for me and my dad, it's about maximizing every single test that we do and being smart in which tracks we test at. Because for me, there's no point in me testing at Monza because it's all straight lines.
Is there something that you would, to the person who you will be in 5 years, what do you want to say to him?
I hope that we made it into motorsport. I hope that we continue, and I hope that I'm happy in whatever I end up doing. even if it's not motorsport. You know, I just being happy is just so important, and enjoying, because you know you only get to live once, so there's no point not enjoying what you're doing. If I really did have to speak to myself in 5 years' time, I'd say remember how hard I'm working now, and to never give up, to really keep working as hard as possible towards, you know, my racing, and staying focused and committed.